folks. The Field and Garden Podcast is honored to be partnering with the Growing for Market magazine. They have been publishing practical ideas and information for direct market flower and vegetable growers for over 31 years. All the articles are written by farmers who get their hands dirty and know what they're doing. The magazine is still on the same mission as when the Flower Farmer book author Len Basinski founded this magazine back in 1992 to connect growers with the best ideas from other growers. There is dedicated flower content in every magazine, a decade's worth of back issues, and over 1,600 archived articles from writers like Aaron Benzenkane, Gretel Adams, Pamela and Frank Arnowski, and Jonathan and Megan Lease, all available on the website. With 10 new issues every year available on paper, digital, or both, you're guaranteed to find something to fine-tune your farm in growing for market. So if you do farmers markets, CSA, farm stands, pick your own, florist sales, or wholesaling, whether you're a commercial grower or you just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market for the nitty-gritty details of growing, marketing, and the business of local farming. And I have a special offer for you. Use the coupon code WORKSHOP to get 25% off any subscription to the original Farmer to Farmer magazine at growingformarket.com. Hey friends, welcome back to another Field and Garden podcast. It is your friend Lisa Mason Ziegler, and thanks for dropping in here today. And I think that what I'm going to talk about today has really became the ebb and flow of the success of my flower farming business. As a small urban grower in the middle of the city that could not have any hoop and greenhouses, I literally was forced to embrace seasonality to actually be successful. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, if you are new here, and I can see that Tucker is rearranging his babies now that we're live, right? And if you're new here, Tucker is my golden retriever who is always at my side, and I do not make him leave when I record. We just count him as part of the show, right? So if you're new here, welcome to the gardenersworkshop.com. We sponsor this podcast and make it all possible. And if you fall in over there, you will find that we have tons of resources. There is tons of free resources, and there is more comprehensive resources made available through online courses. And we have everything from learning how to start seeds and having a little cutting garden in your backyard up to jump starting a flower farming business and then how to scale that business in a lot of different avenues. So if you are in the market to learn more about anything in the flower growing department, we'd love to be the ones to help you. You'll also find over there our online garden shop. And you know, this whole business, the online store business, was really the beginning of the Gardener's Workshop. And it all started when I started teaching people how to garden. Then I started traveling to teach people. And then people wanted the same seeds and the same tools and the same supplies that I was using. Because friends, that is really a short list. I don't use a whole lot of different stuff, but what I use does the job, and it does the job really well. And that's what led me to launch an online garden shop back in 2005. And that garden shop has continued to grow, but not grow as in, I still only sell the 2 garden stand-up hoes that I find to be super useful. You know, 1 hand hoe, and we just kind of stick with those things. But as we find new things, we will add them along the way. And of course, our line of seeds is always growing as we discover and bring back things of the past that we've grown. And you're invited to fall in over there at any given time. And you can sign up for the Gardener's Workshop e-Farm News, which is a once-a-week email that's basically a front page. It just gives all the highlights of a lot of different things that you can choose to go and read. So that's what makes all of this possible. So friends, let's talk about embracing seasonality. And, as I mentioned earlier, I kind of had no other choice but to figure out how I could grow the most in the smallest space, to do it the simplest and easiest way. Because, I was a one-woman show, I think probably for the first 10 years of flower farming, meaning I was seed starting and planting and tending and harvesting and selling, doing it all, right? So I was always looking to streamline the systems that I was following and creating, basically, as I went along. And I can remember just thinking about how can I squeeze more out of this small space. And I will tell you, I think the most efficient growers are those people that grow in smaller spaces than they think they need, meaning they always want more space. So we're always looking to grow more as much as we can from the space that we have. Because I think if you tend to have a really big, wide open space, let's say if I had 10 acres instead of that 1 acre, 1.17 acres that included my house and a couple of buildings, if I had 10 acres, I don't think I'd have ever reached the level of efficiency and the bare bones way that I literally continued to grow, even through all the years of being a successful grower, that I could have potentially maybe done it in a different way. So I'm saying the name of this is Embracing Seasonality, because a common question that I get, and I love it, I am a huge fan and practicer of succession planting, and that means not putting all your eggs in one basket, basically. And when I'm talking about succession planting, most often, I'm talking about repeating, instead of planting your entire, let's say, acre completely in a spring garden, and then you have nowhere to plant your summer garden or additional spring flowers a couple, 3 or 4 weeks later, it's breaking up your garden into blocks. And I think that there are just so many great reasons for doing that. Not only does it spread the work out, it gives you an insurance plan, meaning if something happens to this planting over here, you have more over there. It keeps you having a consistent and constant supply of good quality blooms all the time. And that's what I'm speaking of with succession. And what I did back in those early years, and I see others doing it, and I totally get it, is they're trying to see how to push the envelope on certain flowers beyond that flower's natural growing time. And some can do that because it's all about your conditions, friends. It's all about what your growing conditions are as to whether you can do that or not. And so I did that back in the early years, cool flowers, cool season hardy annuals that I fall plant. I will plant many or most. I actually used to plant almost all of them again in very early spring to have later blooms than the fall planted ones, right? Well, what I learned the hard way, because, I don't go at all or I go big. I would plant gobs of crops, again in very early spring. And what I learned is that I could, in fact, grow many of them, again, by planting in very early spring. But the end result was not really worth it, because whether their stem length wasn't suitable as a cut flower, or they fell victim to disease and pest because of their weakened state from growing out of their preferred conditions. So the question came for me, yes, I can succession plant most everything, but the question is to know when to stop succession planting, because even though you can grow it, should you grow it? Meaning it's a whole different ballpark, friends. If you're a home gardener and there's not really anything riding on it except the way it looks in your bed, and you're not really concerned. But if you're a grower and you are going to give some of your limited space to a crop that is just going to be, a gamble as to whether you really get a good end result. I learned the hard way of where I started drawing lines in the sand is what I started doing. And the other part of this, that by doing that, what I have learned is that I believe that people are naturally drawn to seasonality. Just like we talk about that with food, right? That to eat seasonal, meaning to not eat a tomato in the dead of winter because it was grown in a hothouse somewhere else in the world and shipped to you, that it's just not quite as beneficial to you or not nearly as tasty, right? Well, I do believe that we're also drawn to what is seasonal, and there are definitely seasonal things that you can, define that by, whether it's winter greens, talking evergreens and Christmas with bouts of holly and all of that stuff. And then we grow indoor forcing bulbs all through the winter. And then it starts in very early spring out in the garden with the first poppies and bachelor buttons. And then the party starts all over again. It is such a journey, y'all, to embrace seasonality. And so it's because I am, currently it is now September, so I'm getting lots and lots of cool flower questions, cool season hardy annuals, because, many of us can fall plant some or all of those. And folks are asking me, which ones do I succession plant? And there are a few that I, in my conditions, can really successfully succession plant. And that's something each grower really has to explore on their own. But I would suggest, y'all, here comes Tucker. He's going to itch, so you're going to hear him. Well, maybe not dangle. I thought his collar was going to let y'all have it. That each grower has to explore, but I would recommend not... There he goes. Go lay down, boy. I would recommend not going big, having a test bed. If you're a grower and you have 50-foot beds or 100-foot beds, take one of those beds and plant 5 or 10 feet of these different things you're exploring and see how they turn out, right? And pushing crops beyond. So what happens for me is when I very early spring plant some cool flowers, if it's a normal Virginia, southeastern Virginia spring, we don't get a spring. We go straight from winter straight into hot, humid summers. So those plants just don't even get an opportunity to barely get established before they're having to push up stems. You don't get length. They fall victim to disease and pests. So are you seeing what I'm saying? I'm not saying don't succession plant. I'm saying you need to really evaluate what your succession planting plan is, because I think part of our strong benefit can be embracing seasonality, right? And I love the anticipation of seasonality, Tucker is now dragging his blanket across the floor. He is very similar to Linus from Charlie Brown. He has this blanket that I wash all the time, but it's always dirty. And he drags it from the bedroom to the living room, wherever he's going to lounge. And that's what he's doing now. The anticipation and this natural seasonality is like another succession planting in itself. You know what I mean? It's like we're spreading out the work, we're spreading out the bounty, we're spreading out the quality, we're constantly harvesting and having new things coming on, and it's a natural process. And it also creates vast diversity in your garden. And it also creates natural habitat, for beneficials and pollinators and that whole part of the story also. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it's really a good thing to embrace seasonality. First off, that's the easiest stuff to grow, y'all. When you're growing with the seasons, instead of trying to outsmart the seasons, or tweak the seasons, or create conditions that aren't, normal for that season. I often tell people, they'll ask me about planting, I use cool flowers for so many examples because the whole cool flower concept is about planting the cool season hardy annuals in their preferred time, which means that those plants are either sprouting and growing up into a little plant, or a transplant is becoming established when the soil is cool, going to cold conditions, and then it's just ready to do its job when the growing season comes around. By planting cool season hardy annuals later and later, by pushing this envelope, they're getting more and more into the spring and summer, where they don't have that opportunity to build that incredible foundation, that root system that is the foundation of your plants. I mean, we know for a fact that plants that are punier or just not as well established, that they struggle, that pests are actually attracted to those plants. And disease is not, far from the heels of those insects. So we kind of set our gardens up to have problems. And that's a deep subject, right? I mean, that's the whole basis of regenerative gardening is, putting a plant in its optimal conditions. And guess what, friends? It doesn't get diseases. It doesn't have pest issues. And so by pushing the envelope beyond, you start kind of meddling in that kind of stuff. So I am always looking to make the most out of every season. And so for me, the growing season, the longest growing season is the warm season. I'm in the mid-Atlantic of the United States, and our summers are long. I mean, we pretty much have from April until October or November. It just depends on the fall we have and hurricane season. But we have a long growing season. So obviously that is the optimal succession season for me. But if you live in, let's say, New England in the United States, where the summers are cool and not humid, I mean, you can barely get a tomato plant grown and to bear fruit outdoors naturally because of the cool conditions in some locations. You can grow cool flowers year round. So friends, this is really about finding the journey of what your conditions are and making the most out of your seasons. And so that's what I think I embraced by just default. It's like, all right, once I figured out cool flowers and that there were more of them, and I could grow more and more of them, and I could plant many of them because they were winter hardy in my zone, I could fall plant them so they would kickstart my season. I went from having basically nothing but, peonies in May, and a few other things, a few perennials and bulbs that I had planted, to having a vast garden outside starting to bear fruit, flowers, right, in April and May. I mean, a huge cash crop. It really grew my business. And then, because they're still producing in June, when the warm season annuals start, I mean, the load of flowers that we would produce in June and July from this farm was absolutely phenomenal. And it was because two seasons were coming together as one. And I guess what I really just want to encourage people to consider, instead of trying to figure out how to push and manipulate, embrace what you have. It's like we're going into, it's not mid-September. We're just a few days away from mid-September. And those short day lovers are really starting to kind of come on, I mean, cosmos really, really do love the short days. And dahlias, of course, kick in on those short days. And, embrace the seasons and live that way. And you can plan your garden out, your garden space by that. We're still cutting summer annuals in the fall, but we add other flowers that are fall lovers, cut flower kale. I grew dahlias for many years. I don't grow dahlias now, but we grow more cosmos. We grow amaranth. We grow a lot of these things that are just natural fall, perfect fall decorations. Harvest table stuff, y'all. Orange and yellow and reds and maroons and greens. And, it's a really an ebb and flow. And so the thing about succession planting within your season, it's so much easier as a grower to be able to sell the same flower to the same customer week after week after week. You don't have to reintroduce it. You don't have to tell them about it. You don't have to, do that whole job again. If you take a sample, let's just, sunflowers are was a huge crop for us. I mean, it's what really floated our boat on this farm for the last 10 years of our production years. And after we got a commercial customer on board with our sunflowers, and they were so over the moon with the quality, the selection, just how much more beautiful they were than shipped in, then all of a sudden, of course, they all had stand-in orders. But in addition to that, they found other ways to use sunflowers. I mean, we sold tons of sunflowers for summer caskets. Well, a lot of our florists had big funeral work. A lot of people overlook that. But we took care of two high-volume florists that were really known for their absolutely stunning funeral casket covers. And many of them, it even came known, I think one of the most sweetest things that one day one of the guys called one of our customers, and he said, "Lisa, XYZ has passed away," and the husband came in and said, "We only want Lisa Ziegler sunflowers on that casket," because she was a ray of sunshine, not me, the person's whose casket it was, but that's the reputation of our sunflowers. So we were always trying to get sunflowers as early as we could and to go as late, but I didn't pull out the stops. I'll do a little something to help get them earlier. I have a row cover available to throw over early and late suns if needed, but the payoff was huge on sunflowers, so that extra work was worth it. But not everything pans out that way, and I'm just saying that's what you need to evaluate. Because if your quality slips, that is when you really have to consider. And I'll tell you that the last 3 years of our high production years, when we were serving many supermarkets as well as florists, our members only market, our bouquet subscriptions, and we stopped growing zinnias the second half of the summer. When disease gets ramped up, from the bacteria stuff to all of it, mildew, because what happens is when disease gets in your planting, your plants start to not last in as long in the vase. So that was really hard for us to do it, but we've learned other things to grow in place of zinnias. Nothing really replaces a zinnia, right? Zinnias undoubtedly were the most requested flower we grew for all of those years. Unbelievable, really, right? But because of the quality. So you really have to evaluate. And I believe that when we embrace seasonality, that naturally helps with your quality control, with disease and pest issues. I just think it all goes together, hand in hand. And I believe that customers, they desire seasonality and the change. And I want to just tell you the story of, so it took me several years when I first started growing. I always felt inadequate as a grower. You know what I mean? I always thought, the florists aren't going to want this, or it's not good enough. And I think we all have that a little bit. I did throughout my entire 24-year career of selling commercially. I always had in the back of my mind, are they going to like that, right? Well, so that pushed me. I can remember every winter thinking to myself, okay, I better get something new and special to offer my customers this year to keep them happy. That's what I never really said that, but I look back and think that's what I was thinking, that I had to do something. And several years went by. Y'all, I was growing everything. We grew a huge lily program here for many years, meaning I grew lilies in crates that were programmed and outdoors. I don't have a hoop or greenhouse, and it was a lot of work. It was so worth it. I made a lot of money off those lilies, but it was a lot of work. And I can remember the light switch went on for me when at our members only market. I can remember, all of our buckets. That members only market was a private market. Only people that, had bought shares were invited to come to my farm, which is in the middle of the city, my home, and pick up the flowers they've already paid for. And it's just like a farmer's market. There was loose flowers they could make, or they could pick up a pre-made. And back then, we would have all these other special flowers that I was growing. And I can remember one day, one of our customers who came every week came in, and I said, come over here. I forget what the name of the lily was. It was a new lily, and it was a gorgeous, one of those ones with a different colored throat, and was just so beautiful. I said, come over here and see this lily. They are just absolutely beautiful. And she came over and she looked at it. She said, oh my goodness, that is absolutely beautiful. And she then just turned around and said to Suzanne, I'll take 24 zinnias, please. And that was the day after she left. Suzanne said to me, we never have enough zinnias. That's what these ladies want. And I learned from Frank Arnowski, that was his analogy with sunflowers. Why dabble in all that special stuff if you don't have to or need to, perhaps? If you can just grow more of something that you grow really well, you can grow with a high margin and do it, right? I can remember hearing Frank say that at a conference. That it was a growers school, and the new growers, I was in the back. I was going to be speaking next, and they kept asking Frank, well, don't you do this and don't you do that? And he said, no, I'll just grow more sunflowers. And it sounds so simple, friends, but it is so true. But we all have to consider we can all sometimes grow stuff longer than we are or can, but should we? Do we want to have that same flower all the time? Yes, sometimes it's worth it, like sunflowers. Other times it might not be. For me, for instance, cool season hardy annuals, I mean, it just doesn't matter, that you can get snaps to bloom into the summer by the different groups that you chair. And if you haven't checked that out, Dave Dowling and I did a podcast on snaps. And Dave talks about that in there. And I've tried it. And yes, I can in fact grow snaps further into the summer. But guess what? I get a disease that I have never had in fall and very early spring planted snaps, rust. And there's nothing to be done with rust once you have it. I mean, you can't get rid of it on the plants. And so that was my decision. Okay, well, forget that. But I'm here to tell you that once the first, for instance, zinnia starts blooming in early summer, my customers aren't really interested in Snapdragons anymore. They're done. That's not necessarily true for commercial people, but what quality will they be if you push the envelope? And that's what really just made me want to come on and say, definitely succession plant, definitely experiment with pushing the envelope, but keep in mind, for me, the easiest, the most cost-effective, and the highest quality flowers that I can grow are growing flowers in season. That is a local grower's niche, y'all. It's not having, sweet peas in September. It's having sweet peas in May, when sweet peas normally bloom for me, right? May and June. So I think because the demand is so high for us, it pushes us to do this. But in fact, that customer is going to want the next flower that's supposed to be blooming in your garden for the coming season. So friends, in spring, they're hungry for spring flowers. In summer, they're hungry for summer flowers. In fall, I believe they're hungry for fall-like flowers. And then when winter comes, they want to smell evergreens and they want to see blooming amaryllis. I could go on, but I believe that's what I'm called to do. And I think that in itself is a niche. So friends, we are headed into fall. Our big schools for flower farming school, we have 3 flower farming schools and 2 other courses. My course, The Basics, Annual Crops, Marketing and More. Steve and Gretel's course, Growing Cut Flowers in hoop and greenhouses. Registration is opening. Dave Dowling's course, which is the bulbs, perennials, and woodies, does not register again until next June. But Jenny Love's course, Farmer Florist School, The Wedding Process, which is an amazing business class, friends. We're talking pricing, contracts, what to grow. Do you need to grow everything yourself, in fact? Or should you be sourcing from other growers? It is an amazing, and there is a week, a sessions on marketing that is super beneficial for anybody. And then we also have our hero, Ellen Frost. It's called Florist School, Growing Your Business with Locally Sourced Flowers. And friends, she's basically teaching your commercial customers how and why they should, and how to market locally sourced flowers. So all those are coming up. So I encourage you to investigate them. And we would love to have you join our crew in our schools. So friends, head over to thegardenersworkshop.com if you need more. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app, please drop us a review that lets the podcast app know to show our app to more people. And that's how we grow. The Gardener's Workshop paid services and goods are how we provide all of these free platforms. And we appreciate your patronage so much because I will tell you that all of us are driven to teach and share. And we just want to continue, and we'd love for you to become a part of it. So friends, until we meet again, ciao. Hey friends, I have another super sweet note that I want to share from Jennifer, and I share these not only because they make my heart swell. I know that my students' experiences will help other people to hear how it happened for them. And so I know that there's a lot of you that may be in Jennifer's situation, living in a rural area. So here's what Jennifer wrote in and said. I had my first farmer's market Saturday in our very small town in Georgia. We have one red light, if that tells you anything. I was one of 4 vendors, and within 3 hours, I had sold all of my flowers, and I took quite a bit. I also received a message Saturday night from a very well-known florist in a town 30 minutes away, wanting to know if she could open a wholesale account. Thank you so much for all the amazing information you poured and continue to pour into this class. While I've made several newbie mistakes, this course has truly set me on the right path. Jennifer, I just want to say to you that mistakes pave the road to success, and I want to give you a congratulations, and I'm so proud of you. So, thank you, Jennifer, for sharing.